So overnight, Russia launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile, one designed to carry nuclear warheads, into western Ukraine, very close to the border with Poland. This was the second ever strike by what Russia deems their Oreshnik wonder weapon, and there's an argument to be made here that this is a sign of Russian desperation. Now, diving into this weapon system, first and foremost, the Oreshnik is really just a modified Russian RS-26 intermediate-range ballistic missile. In fact, the Kyiv Independent, quoting Fabian Hoffman, a defense expert, said that he would be surprised if the Oreshnik has more than 10% new parts from the RS-26, suggesting that it's likely just a renamed version of that IRBM that was first produced in 2011. Now, the range estimates here between 3,000 and 5,500 kilometers. It's estimated to be able to operate in speeds excess of Mach 10, and it's equipped, this is kind of one of the unique parts, equipped with multiple independent targetable reentry vehicles, or MIRVs, M-I-R-Vs. So when this warhead is coming in and approaching the target, what that means is it breaks apart. The Oreshnik is supposed to have 6 to 10 of these MIRVs with 6 submunitions in each. So each one of those can be kinetic, like were used in Kyiv, where there weren't actually warheads attached or no explosive charges attached. High explosives could be cluster munitions, and of course, nuclear. So the challenge there with this type of warhead is when your air defense asset goes to engage, not only are they having to deal with the maneuverability and the speed of the missile system, but also multiple warheads then breaking off, engaging different targets. So it's, a case like this makes it very, very, very challenging to effectively intercept every one of those munitions. In fact, Russia says that this one is impossible to intercept. Now, we should note that this is the second combat use of this weapon system. The first was in Dnipro, Ukraine, back on November 21st, 2024, and it's notable where they're using these new, fancy weapon systems. Dnipro and Lviv are not heavily saturated with Ukrainian air defense, certainly not with the newest of the new Western-provided air defense systems. So when they're launching their newest missiles, the ones that Russia says cannot be intercepted by anything, they aren't putting them up against the test that is known, be it Patriot systems, let's say, in Kyiv. This weapon system has not been put to the test against American air defense, at least not to date. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense said tonight, in response to the terrorist attack by the Kyiv regime on the residence of the president of the Russian Federation, the Russian armed forces have launched a massive strike with high-precision, long-range ground and sea-based weapons, including the mobile medium-range ground-based missile system Oreshnik, as well as strike unmanned aerial vehicles on critical facilities in Ukraine. So the rationale given here is that there was a terrorist attack that Ukraine launched, they said, as many as 91 drones against Putin's residence a few weeks, or a little over a week ago. The United States said that didn't actually happen. Ukraine never claimed that happened. Russia just started saying it. President Trump this past weekend asked about it, said that something happened nearby Putin's residence, but the American officials did not find that the Russian president's residence was targeted. Quote, "I don't believe that strike happened," said President Trump. "We don't believe that happened now that we've been able to check." So again, when we're talking about kind of big picture here, is this a sign of Russian desperation? This is one of the things we need to point to, is if they have to fabricate the reason to use this fancy new weapon system, why, right? It's a signal to the United States and a signal to Ukraine's Western partners. Now, in terms of the target and the effects on target, which are largely unknown at this point, Russian media Rybar says the focus here was an underground gas storage facility in Lviv. Again, this is the western portion of Ukraine, which they note is the largest gas storage facility in Europe and one of the most hard-to-reach targets. They say depths for that storage is 690 to 890 meters below ground. That's very important here, as Rybar goes on to explain how the Orishnik was able to effectively destroy this target. It feels like probably not, but either way, 690 to 890 meters below ground is a long ways below ground, but they say the vulnerability here is that it's surrounded by a tectonic structure with many faults. And they say to partially damage the facility, you would need either a nuclear charge of more than 100 kilotons or to trigger that seismic impact. And that's what they say the Oreshnik did. So they say the Oreshnik cannot penetrate 890 meters through the ground, but even without explosives, it can cause seismic waves and disrupt geological tightening along tectonic fault lines. Look, I don't know. That's over my head, to be honest. I have a hard time believing that any weapon system is able to penetrate 890 meters. I mean, even go on the low end here, 690 meters. And the idea that something without an explosive charge would be able to trigger a significant seismic event seems a little far-fetched. I mean, if we look at the Iranian nuclear, I have a feeling that somebody's going to be able to look at these stats and what Russia is explaining, somebody much smarter than I, and say this is absolutely ridiculous for reasons 1, 2, and 3. I'm not that smart when it comes to this stuff. But when you look at the nuclear facilities in Fordo and Isfahan that the United States destroyed in Iran, some of those weapon systems, those bunker busters, didn't necessarily have to reach the bunker itself. They just had to get close enough to kind of help cave it in, and the shock waves moving through that disrupted what's a very, very sensitive facility. That was a fraction. I think we're talking about, was it maybe 200 at the deepest, 180 meters, I think was one of those. And the U.S. used our fanciest, highest end bunker buster bombs and needed multiple going through the ventilation shafts. So not sure that Russia has developed the capability to go 6x that depth and just displayed it in Western Ukraine. But again, look for the experts to pick that one apart. Now, Ukraine's deputy energy minister did say that gas distribution pipelines had been damaged. Those, of course, aren't necessarily 700 meters below ground. And a source in Ukraine, Sergei Flash, the head of the Radio Technology Center, was reportedly out there in Lviv and said that the Oreshnik did break through 2 slab floors, as in it was able to penetrate through a couple levels there. And he said, funny enough, it burned an entire collection of Lenin's works. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I guess technically we don't know if any of the thing the guy says is true, but the penetration of 1 to 2 levels below ground kind of checks out. You could see that happening just with kinetic force. Again, 700 meters seems like a bit of a stretch. Now, there was an interesting analysis I came across here on X by Tindar, so an analyst over on that platform. He said the use of the Orishnik was a predictably weak Russian gambit, and it is easily explained. Russians are absolutely desperate. The situation for them is getting out of control across the globe. Their allies and their power are disappearing on a huge scale. This strike is another attempt to influence Western decision makers. And there's some truth to that. Again, when you look at the idea that this might have been an act out of desperation to try to scare the West into saying, enough's enough, let's just wrap this thing up, whatever you need, Russia. Look at what's happened just in the last year, a little over a year now, right? We saw Bashar al-Assad flee Syria. Now he's playing video games somewhere in Moscow. That was a major Russian ally. Venezuela, I mean, Maduro just got snatched out of his bed in the middle of the night, and the Russians did nothing at all. Iran seems on the brink of collapse right now. There's reports, unverified reports, it wouldn't be shocking, that Khamenei is looking at ways to possibly flee the country, and you have to expect that the area he might go would be Moscow. He can share a room with Assad. You know, that'd be great. Maybe we'll extradite Maduro over there after his trial as well and send him. You got a little 3-bedroom flat there in Moscow for those guys. But either way, you've got these, just in the last year, the Russian influence around the world is starting to wane. Add to this, yesterday or 2 days ago, the U.S. seizing a ship in the Atlantic, a Russian-flagged vessel. And Russia painted their flag on the side of that, thinking that would protect this, and U.S. surely won't cross that line. And we went right ahead and took it anyways. In fact, following that, there are Russian analysts starting to get concerned, saying, hey, for everybody saying that we need to protect this fleet around the world, do you understand that we do not have the naval capabilities to do that? Kind of coming to grips that they're talking a big talk, but maybe not able to walk a big walk. One of the ways that they can, and this is an area that has certainly influenced a lot of decision makers around the world for decades now, is their use of nuclear weapons. And that's what the Oreshnik here is designed to show. Again, this is a weapon system designed to carry a nuclear payload. So every time they use it, especially in a combat situation, it is showing, just a reminder, we have this, we could use this if needed. It's going back to the old Russian nuclear saber rattling toolbox. Tendar continues by saying, Russians lost virtually all control to actively change the situation on the ground, except their complete withdrawal. Of course, they can continue their costly meat waves, but the front is basically static. They will not come anywhere near to a satisfying point in the coming years, and they know that they don't have the stomach for it. Again, look at what happened this last year. The major victory for Russia was supposed to be the taking of Pokrovsk, the 72nd largest town in Ukraine. That was going to be their major victory 3 years in this war. Are you kidding me? And it didn't happen. It's still holding. Like, it's contested for sure. And I mean, even the northern portions of Pokrovsk are contested. But again, the 72nd largest town in Ukraine was going to be the crown jewel in Putin's crown for their conquest in 2025. It didn't happen, and it still hasn't. Talk about how the bar has gotten lowered over time. And I understand folks will immediately say, yeah, but attrition. Look at the losses. Correct. Look at the losses. For anybody that's keeping track, what is happening in the Donbass right now is Ukraine has created a death trap. It is an industrial-size killing field that they have perfected in a lot of ways. They have the logistical supply chains, moving drones and long-range strike munitions out there, and the Russians trying to move forward anywhere along the front. I mean, you can start up in Izium all the way down to Dobropilia, to a degree over in Zaporizhia. Day in and day out, it is incredibly costly for Russia, again, to not yet take the 72nd largest town in Ukraine. Think about that. So I think Tindar's onto something here, saying, look, the front is very static and very costly for the Russians as we get into 2026. He says, but the Russian stunt must not be unanswered either. Firing ballistic missiles designed only for nuclear warheads, especially so close to the Polish NATO border, demands a proper response. Western militaries must always assume that this kind of projectile is armed and countermeasures are in place. The proper response would be for European nations to close all airspace in Western Ukraine and deploy air assets as well as fighter jets in this sector. This precedence created by Russia not only warrants this action, it would completely neutralize Russian scare tactics by having the exact opposite effect of the Russian intent. I've advocated for that before as well when we talk about what the next step might be in terms of U.S. or European, we'll say, participation in this conflict beyond just providing intelligence and material support. I think a very viable move would be to shut down that border, a no-fly zone in Western Ukraine because of this. I mean, just a few months ago, we saw Russian drones penetrating Polish airspace. Can't have that. Lock that down. Put aircraft in the sky, stand up air defense assets, and push them into Western Ukraine and make it very clear. Anything comes near this border from Russia, it's getting shot down. I think that's a very reasonable next step, especially now as we're seeing these IRBMs, nuclear-capable IRBMs, being fired, in the direction of Poland, right? The Polish and NATO authorities had to be very, very confident in this case that it was not just going to continue on to Warsaw, but stop and impact in Ukraine. Now, Ukraine's deputy foreign minister said, quote, such a strike close to the European Union and NATO border is a grave threat to the security on the European continent and a test for the transatlantic community. Putin uses an IRBM near the border in response to his own hallucinations. This is truly a global threat, and it demands global responses. Again, the reason that Russia says they carried this out has not been proven accurate. All we got from Russia was saying, yeah, this strike happened against Putin's residence. Everybody else said, no, it didn't. What on earth are you even talking about? So I think there's valid reason here to say that the execution of this strike and the timing of the strike does have to do with the degree of Russian desperation. Now, a quick update, again, just back from Ukraine a couple days ago. While there, we were able to deliver some of the drones that you all helped purchase for Chaos Company's 2nd Mechanized Battalion of the 3rd Assault Brigade. So I've got a video here for you where we had a chance to meet up with Linguist. We've interviewed him before, talking about some of the drones that his unit is using. Here you go. All right, what's going on, everyone? We're here in Izium with the 3rd Assault Brigade. We've got 5 of the drones that you all helped provide. So 5 of 10, 12, 15 that are on their way. These are some of the thermal Mavics. You can talk to the guys in 3AB, 2nd Battalion specifically, that really needed some help looking through some of the fog and the tough weather out in the east. So y'all came through in a matter of a couple weeks. It's not even New Year's yet, and we've got these in their hands. So just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much. I'm here with Linguist and kind of walking us through all the work they're doing. These are going to come in handy. It's so incredibly generous of all of you to come through like this. So again, thank you so much coming here from Izium with 3AB.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Now, that fundraiser was awesome. So the 3AB guys reached out saying, we need thermal drones, especially in this Liman direction. The fog's coming in. It's hard to see the Russians advancing. You all came together. They said, can we get 5, maybe 10? 10 would be awesome, thermal drones. And like in the span of 2 weeks or something like that, we hit the $40,000 goal and we're like, we better bump this up. Then we hit 50, 60, 70. Right now it sits at 79,000. So what's going to happen there is the team at Ukraine Aid Operations just sent me a note. That's going to result in 15 thermal drones. They need them, right? They just thought asking for 5 was a lot. 10 might be too much. Every one of those 15 is going to be put immediately into the fight because of you. On top of that, there's it's a used off-road SUV that the unit needs. They didn't even think we'd come near enough for them to be able to include that in the campaign. That's going to be purchased and transferred to them as well. We'll get you those updates as soon as they come in. But awesome work, everyone. It is so cool. And to be there, to be able to meet the guys that are going to use this equipment and see how thankful and grateful they are to you all. Jesus, I got more on this later. I got a little choked up a couple times because it's incredibly powerful stuff. Now, the strikes did continue across Ukraine yesterday. It was not just this one Oreshnik strike. According to a couple different sources, at least 20 different residential buildings have been damaged across Ukraine. Overall, it looks like there were 244 drones, 13 ballistic missiles, and 22 cruise missiles, in addition to the Orishnik fired by Russia into Ukraine overnight. Of the 278 munitions fired, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense says they were able to destroy or suppress 244. They said they shot down 226 of 244 UAVs, 8 of 13 ballistic missiles, and 10 of 22 cruise missiles. They noted impacts of 18 missiles and 16 strike UAVs at 19 different locations. And of course, some pretty horrific footage coming out of Ukraine showing residential high-rises being hit in the middle of the night. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense, following this attack, said, as they always do, that the objectives of the strike have been achieved. Quote, the targets of the attack were production facilities of unmanned aerial vehicles, which were used in the terrorist attack, the one talking about striking Putin's home last week, as well as energy infrastructure that supports the operation of Ukraine's military-industrial complex. Now, no doubt the energy infrastructure was hit. In fact, the Kyiv mayor Klitschko urged Kyiv residents, those that are able, to temporarily leave the city and try to go someplace where there are alternate sources of power and heat. The energy grid in Ukraine, as temperatures dip well below zero or well below freezing, is becoming very, very overworked right now. And again, they're under near daily attack by Russian drones. The Kyiv Independent reported that the strikes overnight resulted in the death of at least 4 people, with 24 more wounded, saying that electricity had been knocked out for hundreds of thousands as temperatures begin to fall. They added that one of those killed was a paramedic that went in to try to rescue some from a first strike when a second attack came on that exact location, what's referred to as a double tap. They say 16 of the 24 so far have been hospitalized. The health minister said the emergency medical team arrived at the site of a strike on a residential building when Russia launched the second wave, killing that first responder. They added 4 other medics were injured, and 4 other medics were injured, along with 5 other rescuers. So a large number of those injured overnight were the first responders moving in to help the civilians after they experienced and had to deal with that first wave of Russian strikes. Now, as tragic as last night's strike was, one thing worth keeping an eye on is 278 munitions fired. The 244 drones is a relatively small number compared to what we've seen in the past, and I don't want to downplay having to live through that and having to experience those air raid sirens and especially the people thinking they're in the clear and then another wave comes in. That is the stuff of nightmares, no doubt. But within the last few months, we have seen waves of 400, 500, 600 plus drones used in a night, and we haven't seen that for quite a while. So I'm a little bit nervous that the production there didn't stop. No doubt Ukrainian drone strikes over the course of the last few months have impacted that to some degree. It may have limited the production, but there's no way it dropped down from the estimated 400, 500, 600 being produced a day down to what this would be 20, 30, 40 over the course of the last few weeks. So my gut says that we should probably expect another few pretty large-scale attacks against Kyiv and other targets, especially by Shaheds here as we start the new year. So it's something we'll have to keep an eye on. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.